Good morning everyone, back to our little Corsa, and today we're gonna be changing the coolant inside the car. We're doing this because the coolant has actually never been changed. The car is about 7 years old and still has the original coolant. I did a quick measurement on the state of the coolant using our densimeter, and as you can see, if it's working properly, right now it's somewhere at about 20 minus 23 minus 24 degrees. Okay, and if it were according to the manual, i.e. 50% antifreeze, 50% water, it should be close to minus 37. So this means that in this current state the car has a larger percentage of water, a smaller percentage of antifreeze. So we want to change it. Whenever you want to play around with coolant, always, and I mean absolutely always, make sure that the car is cool. Never work on this when the coolant and the car is hot. You can see it also says here on the cap, it says warning, never open hot, because this thing is under pressure, and if it's hot, you open this, it's gonna spill out and might, there's a risk of injury. Our car is cool, so it should be in principle a typical case of draining the old one, putting the new one in. But in this case, there's also a little catch. Now, normally the entire cooling system has fluid inside the reservoir, inside the hoses, inside the radiator, as well as inside the engine block. When we're gonna drain this coolant, we will not be able to drain the percentage of it that's inside the engine block. And this engine does not have a dedicated drain for coolant, which means that what we're gonna take out is only a fraction of the entire coolant. Now, the manual says that the total coolant volume is about 6 liters for this engine. Again, this is a 1.4 petrol engine, and it should have a capacity of 6 liters. So in order to figure out how much is left in the engine block, we filled it up to the correct level. Now the level is a bit higher because we ran the car for a while and it's still cooling. But I mean the coolant is warm. It's safe to the touch right now. It should drop a few more millimeters. We're gonna see what volume we drain out, subtract that from 6, and that will be the coolant that is left inside the engine block. And because of this, we're gonna put new coolant in today. We're gonna drive the car for, let's say, a month or two to make sure that the new is mixed with the old, and then we're gonna redrain and refill such that we further reduce the percentage of old coolant fluid left in the system. Okay, and during this time we'll also take measurements just for fun, to figure out how much antifreeze and how much water we have to put, primarily because at the time of filming this video, I may not have sufficient antifreeze to get a 50-50 mix. But this is April, it's gonna get warmer, so it's not really a problem if I put more water and less antifreeze for 1 or 2 months. Okay, so stick around. And remember that this car has a metal underbody shield that we need to remove. It's held together with four 17mm bolts, 2 at the front, 2 at the back. Over there's one and there's the other one. Now the rearmost ones don't need to be taken off completely. They just need to be slackened off because the shield just slides from them. But the frontmost ones need to be removed altogether. And after we've removed the underbody shield, we're underneath the car. There's your radiator, there's your fan, and this is the drain. Now this is a plastic bit that you normally have to unscrew. It's a 13mm socket that you have to unscrew, and this will drain the fluid from the radiator, from the expansion tank at the top, that one, and from all the hoses that are accessible. And we're only going to be left like I said, with the coolant inside the engine block, which we can't remove. Okay, so how I'm gonna proceed here is I don't have a torque spec for this, and this is plastic, by the way, so it's and it may also be brittle depending on the age of the car. So what I figured to do was, you see I made a marking here, a line, and I'm gonna count the number of times I twist it to open it, and when I'm gonna put it back, I'm gonna turn it the same number of times, and that way it should be at the same torque level as before. Okay, so use a 13 millimeter, and just be careful when you do this to not break this. You really don't want to break this. But if, for example, let's say you've done this a number of times and you've stripped the threads from the plastic bit and you can't open anymore, leave it here, that's fine. And you can also remove this hose, okay, which is at the bottom. So whichever works for you. This requires something to unclip this and put it at the back. But I'm gonna, because I know this has never been opened, I'm gonna first try with this. Another quick note, as you probably know, antifreeze is extremely toxic and it's sweet, so it can attract animals and or I don't know, children, heaven forbid. And it's extremely toxic, so you always want to catch this in a container and dispose of it properly. You don't want to throw it away on the ground or outside or anything like that. Okay, so let's get started. And we've brought our trusted catch container, which has a capacity of 16 liters, so more than we need. We've slackened this off, we've done one full turn, and you can already see it's starting to drip. Okay, open it a bit more, so now it's one full turn, and maybe even more, something like this, so it has some flow to it. All right, and to make sure that you have a steady flow, also open the cap so that air can get in, like so, and then just let it slowly drain, I don't know, for as long as it takes. And here it is draining. Okay, I've opened the cap and you can see the fluid draining down there. I'll just leave it until it stops draining altogether. And after about 10 minutes, I've drained as much as I can from that side, but apparently there is still some coolant there. So for the sake of the exercise, I'm also gonna remove the right hand side hose and see if we can get any more coolant out. And on the right side, we have moved the metal clip to the right and moved the container, and let's see if we get anything more. On this side it's probably gonna be a bit messier. Let's see how. Yes, we definitely got a bit more. All right, so let's leave it here to drain for as much as it can. And after all of this is done, we know we've pretty much drained as much as we could, and we're gonna measure what we got and figure out how much is left in the engine block. And continuing on, we've tightened the plastic drain at the bottom left of the radiator. We've also put back the hose, this one, okay. And now what we want to do is, if you take a look inside the reservoir, you can see it has some dirt in it. Okay, it's not too much, it looks in good shape, but I still want to clean it. And to do that, we'll have to remove the two hoses, this small bolt, and then the reservoir should just come out. But notice that even though we drained as much as we could, there's still some coolant there. So this one will be easy to remove, but when we remove the second one, we'll also have a funnel or something to just drain everything that comes out from here to the container. And you see we've managed to remove the top hose. We managed to move to the side the clip from the bottom one. We've used a small funnel to catch any remaining coolant from the reservoir, and it's supposed to drip into the catch can underneath. And here's all the coolant we got. You can see that it's orangey. It appears that there's also a little bit of oil, but the oil is not from the coolant. It's actually from the fact that I also use the catch can for draining oil. So there's no problem there. And here's the reservoir all removed and due to be thoroughly cleaned. And this is what we've got. These two are 2-liter bottles, and if you look at them, it means we got about a bit more than 3 liters and a bit less than, let's say, 3.5, so somewhere around 3.3 liters. So we got a little over half of the coolant capacity inside the car. I was honestly expecting for more, but this is what we got, which means that we still have about 2.7 liters of coolant in the engine block, all the way to the thermostat. Right, onwards with cleaning the reservoir. Because ours is not so dirty, I guess we're just gonna use water, soap, and a small brush to clean it the insides of it as best we can. Right. And again, I'm emphasizing the point that coolant is extremely toxic, and as you can see, the second reason why I use these bottles is now they're properly stored inside. They can't be accessible to animals, and if you wanna, it would be ideal to also put them out of reach of children until you can dispose of them properly. Again, do not throw them down the drain, do not throw them on the ground. This is extremely toxic. And we've cleaned out the exterior first of all, and the interior we've used so far only some dish soap and warm water with a number of cycles and cleaning and throwing the water away. This is how it looks like, but as you can see, there's still some dirt inside. So what we're gonna do exactly what we did with the reservoir for the power steering fluid of the Range Rover. That is, we're gonna use a brush and a very small amount of petrol and just clean the inside, dip the brush into petrol and clean the inside, and after you're done, flush everything out with some water and you should be good. Again, emphasizing, don't use too much petrol because petrol eats plastic, so only a small amount. And here's the result after thoroughly cleaning with brush and petrol. You can see it looks much better inside. Obviously, it's impossible to perfectly clean it because this reservoir has various chambers that are inaccessible. But I think we managed to do a good job, right? So the reservoir is in good shape. It's as clean as you could get it. And now it's time to put everything back together. And as for antifreeze, I'm going to use the brand Hipu, which is a well-known brand. They manufacture water pumps and antifreeze, and they're fairly good. We checked the standard on the box. It says it's compatible with Opel 1940663. Now the Haynes manual that I'm using whenever I'm doing maintenance on the Opel says 1940650, but as far as I've seen, you can use them interchangeably. This is red colored. This is 100% concentrate, and we're adding this first, and then we're going to add distilled water. So as I said, we're going to use about 1.9 liters of pure antifreeze, and the remaining it's going to be distilled water. And another important observation when you're filling up with coolant for this particular car The front bumper over here, there is a hole. If you look underneath, you can see down there, there's a yellow plastic screw with a Phillips head that you need to open that to bleed the air while you're pouring coolant, right? So the procedure is you slightly open that and you pour new coolant until you see coolant coming out of there. So let's do that. And we're finishing the addition of about 1 liter of fresh coolant. And now I'm adding half a liter of distilled water. And you can already see the level has risen, but then again we do have air in the system. And we haven't yet purged all the air because there's no coolant coming out of the drain yet. So we continue with the remaining amount of antifreeze and water. Now when you've put some amount of coolant in and there's still air in, the one thing you can do before starting the engine and letting the coolant circulate is you can take the hoses that deliver coolant and just press on them gently, and you'll see that they can force, see? They can force some of the air that's in the system out, right? And make the level drop a bit, and then you fill up a bit, and so on. And repeat this for a number of times. And we've put about 1.2 liters of distilled water and about 1.5 liters of pure antifreeze. And everything is tightened. We've also tightened the breather. We've pressed on the pipes for as best we could to make sure we get most of the air out. And now we're at the point where we're gonna start the car and force the new coolant to circulate through the system. Some observations here. The manual says that the car should be started held at about 2000 RPM until it reaches operating temperature. That is about 90 degrees Celsius. Because somewhere around that point, the thermostat's gonna open. Why I'm mentioning this? Because normally the thermostat starts off closed, unless it's defective, in which case it will remain open. But if all is well, it starts off closed, meaning whenever the car is cool, at first you only the coolant inside the engine block circulates repeatedly. It doesn't go through the radiator, right? That only happens when the thermostat opens, and it also takes up the new coolant. After the engine has started, again, squeeze the pipes to make sure there's no air. And also, very importantly, turn the heater inside the car on to maximum to make sure that the coolant inside the heat exchanger is also getting circulated. This will obviously lower the level of the coolant inside the reservoir because, again, the air that's still in the system gets replaced with coolant. Do the cycle, and at the end, after the car has warmed up and you made sure that there are no leaks, everything works fine, again, let it cool and top up with more coolant as necessary. In our case, we only need to top up with estimated about half a liter more of pure coolant. And just like I said, I started the engine, and you can see the temperature inside is set to maximum possible to make sure that we also get warm air and the coolant circulates through the heater. Now you can already see the coolant level has dropped a bit. So again, squeeze on pipes to make sure we get as much air out of the system as we can. Make sure to not touch anything that gets hot. Okay. And after a couple of minutes, we let the engine warm up. Another quick tip. Now this car doesn't have a temperature indicator, but it is in a hidden menu, and for that you have this button. You need to press 3 times and then on the fourth you keep it pressed until this screen changes. So 1, 2, 3 and hold. And we're holding for about 10-15 seconds. And there it is. And then you have to press 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. And this is the coolant temperature. Okay, you can see it's currently 35 degrees Celsius and climbing slowly. And now what we're gonna do is we want to accelerate and keep it at about 1500 to 2000 RPM, or maybe a bit more. Obviously I'm not gonna stay in the car to do this. I'm gonna put something in that's gonna depress the accelerator at a certain level, and then I'm gonna move back to the engine to compress hoses to make sure we get as much as the air out as we can. And here we are after we went on a test drive for 20-25 minutes, where we checked that the engine reached its operating temperature, so it began to mix the new coolant with the old one. And we also checked the density of the new mix, and as you can see, it's closer to about -30 now. And what I suspect happens is, I don't think that we've driven enough to properly mix the old and the new fluids. So we'll drive some more for a couple of weeks and then take a new measurement, and my expectation is it should get closer to -37, which corresponds -37 degrees Celsius, which corresponds to the 50-50 mix. But in any case, and precisely because we've only replaced about half of the fluid, this means right now we have half old, half new. We're gonna, like I said before, drive it for a couple of weeks or maybe a few months, and then replace the coolant again. And at the end of that operation, we will be left with 1/4 old fluid and 3/4 new one, which should be sufficient for a couple of years of normal driving. Okay everyone, thanks for watching. Bye bye.